The worst neighborhoods on the Oregon coast. Where are they? What are they? High crime, low property values, high unemployment, low income. These are metrics usually used to determine if an area is nice to live or not. You've probably seen some of those lists, like those top 10 lists, top 10 worst places to live in the state of Oregon, top 10 most dangerous places to live in the state of Oregon. I took a look at all those lists. I didn't find any lists for the Oregon coast, but I did notice that just about all of those lists had at least one Oregon coast town on their list. And in fact, some of them had 3, 4, even 5 Oregon coast towns as part of their top 10 list for the entire state, which was kind of surprising. It got me to thinking that if you haven't actually been to the Oregon coast, or you're not familiar, you might think that the Oregon coast is maybe not such a nice place to live. You might think it's actually the worst place out of all of Oregon to live if you just went by these lists. So in this video, I'm going to give you the honest truth about the worst neighborhoods on the Oregon coast. I'm going to go over some of the real numbers, some of the data, so you can see for yourself. And if you think that we've missed one, you can leave a comment, let us know, we'll consider it for our next video. All that coming up right now. Hey everyone, Seth Marchant with the Home Team Brokers here. If you're new to this channel, living on the Oregon coast, we show you what it's like to eat, sleep, work, play, all the pros and cons of living on the Oregon coast, and in this case, the worst neighborhoods on the Oregon coast. So hit the subscribe button, tap the bell, give us a like, make sure that you get notified each time we drop a new video. We get people reaching out to us all the time that want to move along the Oregon coast, so give us a call, send us an email, shoot us a text. You can even click the link below to schedule a Zoom or comment, we'll respond right away. Okay, now on to the list. But first, a little bit of the honest truth. All right, I'm gonna give this to you both personally and professionally. So personally, first, I've lived in the state of Oregon my entire life, almost 40 years. I've spent a lot of time all up and down the Oregon coast. I've stayed in every major town, a lot of the small towns, probably not every single small town, there's a lot of little ones, but I spent a lot of time, and I can say unequivocally that I have never felt unsafe or really even uncomfortable in all of my experiences, all my time I've spent along the Oregon coast. And I say that realizing that I am a male, I am larger in stature, I'm not a small person, but I think that would probably be true of anybody. I've never been with anybody or really even heard about anybody having a bad experience. I'm sure that there are bad experiences, I'm sure that there is crime, of course, those things happen. We're going to talk about some of those things in the numbers, but for me personally, if you're, again, going back to those lists, just looking at those top 10 lists of the worst places to live in the state of Oregon, and so many of those coastal towns showing up there, you really might think that it's maybe not a safe place, but that hasn't been the case for me personally. And I can maybe give you a few examples. So when I was 15, I went down to California in the Bay Area with my family on a family vacation, and we were staying, it was kind of the South Bay area around Sunnyvale, and we were getting something to eat before we went back to the hotel room. We were just grabbing a few drinks at like a convenience store. I was in there with my mom, and we were standing in line, and somebody comes in and says, "Somebody quick, call 911, somebody's been shot outside." Well, that was pretty jarring for me. I'd never experienced anything like that before. The cashier barely lifted an eyebrow. Nobody else really seemed to care too much in the store either, so just seeing other people's reactions or kind of non-reactions was also sort of surprising, especially as a 15-year-old. We went outside right away, of course, and sure enough, there was somebody laying on the ground there, and there was people standing around that person. Now, we traveled along to LA after that. It was like a 5-day trip between San Francisco and LA. And I can say that some of the things that I saw and experienced definitely made me feel more unsafe than the entire rest of the time that I spent along the Oregon coast, if that gives you any more context. Okay, well, how about a recent example? Let's see. City of Portland. I love the city of Portland. I will say though that the last few years it's been rough for the city of Portland. They've had a rough time, kind of like a lot of cities, but Portland in particular definitely has struggled. And it's still beautiful. There's still a lot of nice parts, but there's definitely some parts that have really deteriorated. And there's probably some places that I used to go have lunch that I might feel way more uncomfortable there than anywhere that I could find along the Oregon coast. Okay, so like, what does that actually look like? Well, what do you actually see? Trash everywhere, lots of homeless people or houseless people, however you want to refer to them, lots of drugs, needles. Some of these people sometimes will be aggressive, yell at you, throw things at you, occasionally, try and do something like intimidate you. Whereas my experiences on the Oregon coast, there's going to be some homeless people here and there. You're going to see some of that. Maybe you see some drugs. Some of the bigger cities, you might see some of the people walking around that look like they're on drugs. You might see a little bit of that, but I've never experienced some of the things that I've experienced in Portland along the Oregon coast. Again, probably one day in Portland is probably going to be more than I would ever get my entire lifetime along the Oregon coast. If that kind of gives you maybe a better sense of like maybe what some of the worst neighborhoods on the Oregon coast are even going to look like. It's probably not that bad. If you're coming from a big city, Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, you're used to some of the stuff that you see in the big cities, you're probably not going to see some of that stuff anywhere along the Oregon coast. Okay, now professionally, as a licensed real estate broker in the state of Oregon, you are not supposed to steer people towards or away from particular homes or particular neighborhoods. Big no-no, definitely frowned upon. So I just want to make it very clear that if your home or a home that you want to move to is on one of these lists or in one of these areas, we will be more than happy to work with you. I think all of Oregon is great. Again, there's some parts that are better than others, but anybody that needs help buying or selling a home, we don't care where you live, we'll be happy to work with you. Okay, now so on to the list. All right, so first on the list we have Warrenton. Now Warrenton's kind of a funny one. If you look at this map, the green indicates low crime, the yellow higher crime, and red the highest crime. And according to this website, crimegrade.org, Warrenton's overall rating is a C. The violent crime grade is an A-. So what that means is there's very low violent crime. However, the property crime is a little bit higher. That's what's probably driving that grade right there. That's probably what's driving that overall grade. If we look down here, your chance of being a victim of crime in Warrenton may be as high as 1 in 22 or as low as 1 in 45 in the south part of the city. Now, interestingly enough, Warrenton actually had a neighborhood that made our top neighborhoods video, which is right here, Surf Pines. And I looked at a lot of crime stats for this area. Surf Pines and actually this Sunset Beach area, overall, property crime, violent crime, specific types of crime that people look out for, such as burglary, were all very, very low in these areas. And again, as you can kind of see, there's no red all throughout Warrenton. So I think Warrenton's fine. I think it's a nice place. I've been through that. I mean, there's not a lot there. It's a smaller town. It's one of the smallest towns in the area in Clatsop County. I think the population is probably under 10,000 people. So all in all, if you're looking to move around Warrenton, I found this stat as well. Crime rate of 75 per 1,000 residents. Warrenton has one of the highest crime rates in America compared to all communities of all sizes. That's according to neighborhoodscout.com. Now, where does this kind of get confusing? Well, these websites, they're pulling data from different places. They might be looking at data from the FBI, data from the local police department, data from the sheriff's department, data from other law enforcement agencies, and they might be basing overall grades on violent crime, or it could be overall crime or specific types of crime. So that's why sometimes you kind of see some conflicting stories, or you kind of see some of these towns that maybe might not be that bad that end up maybe sounding worse than they are. This question, according to Crime Grid, is Warrenton safe? Warrenton is the 46th percentile for safety, meaning 54% of cities are safer. So it's kind of right there in the middle, according to this website. According to this website, it's dangerous. I looked at a lot of the stats. It is mostly property crime, and it's really not that high relative to the rest of the country. So I would say don't let that scare you. Warrenton is probably a fine place to live. Let's look at the 10-year numbers so we can maybe get a feel for trends. This is data reported by the FBI, which is collected by the Warrenton Police Department from 2010 to 2020. So this might also get Warrenton in some of those top 10 lists. Crime has been relatively low, and for whatever reason, they kind of saw a spike and didn't even hit 30 per thousand. Looks like it must be about 26 or 27 per thousand. Not even that high. Looks like it kind of jumped up around, let's see, this must be around the lockdown. It jumped up a little bit. So that's actually pretty common. I've seen that a lot, numbers jumping up during the lockdown. So even though this looks like it might be trending up, it's still actually not that high. All right, let's move on to the next town, which is right next door, Astoria. Now Astoria, here you're gonna get some red. And the rate and the grade for Astoria is a D-, violent crime C+, property crime F. So lots of property crime, not so much the violent crime. This is kind of the downtown area. Lots of food and restaurants around here. Other than that, all of this is residential. It gets kind of rural as you go out this way and head east. Let's see what this says. Your chance of being a victim of crime in Astoria may be as high as 1 in 4. That's just crime, not a violent crime, or as low as 1 in 47. I'm not sure where they're getting that. Again, that seems kind of high, so they may have found some sort of metric that will back that up. But me personally, I've always felt pretty safe. It's pretty nice. I don't think any of these areas are really too bad. Maybe some areas along here, along the water, but all in all, Astoria is pretty nice. All right, so on to the next, Seaside. Seaside actually has a neighborhood that made our top neighborhoods video as well, which was down here. This is known as the Seaside Cove neighborhood. So, all right, so where's the red at? Right around downtown, but on the other side of the river. This is Broadway right here. This is that turnaround. If you've ever been to Seaside and stayed for a bit, you probably drove down this road and did a little turnaround. All right, these areas. This is where Safeway is. This is where the outlet malls are too, where people do all their shopping. Kind of one of the big attractions for Seaside. If you spend much time here, this is red, but you know, I personally have never really felt unsafe or really seen anything that made me feel unsafe in these areas. So if this is the worst that Seaside has, it's probably not actually that bad. All right, let's take a look at the 10-year for Seaside. They actually kind of spiked in 2017. And then you see some lockdown pandemic stuff, probably driving numbers back up again, but that spiked up to almost to 80 out of 1,000 people. But now it's down here back in the 30s. So still relatively low, and it looks like we're trending down. All right, next we have Coos Bay. Coos Bay, as you kind of see, there's another town right here called North Bend. These two kind of go hand in hand. Area is kind of known as the Coos Bay North Bend area. It's one of the larger areas on the Oregon coast. This is one of those areas I mentioned sometimes. You might see like some of the homeless transient people, some people walking around the streets that might look like they're on drugs. You might see that a little bit, and you might see that kind of around the downtown Coos Bay area. Let's see, the website here at crimegray.org gives them a D. B- for violent crime, property crime D-. So again, it's the high property crime, probably people on drugs committing these crimes. Chance of being a violent victim in Coos Bay, 1 in 307 and 1 in 863 in the southeast part of city. So that's pretty low. To give you a little further context, the state of Oregon, your chance of being a victim of violent crime in the state of Oregon is 1 in 352. So a lot of these numbers are well below the state average, or at least this one is right here. California is 1 in 227. So if you compare that to California, definitely lower than California. All right, next is Lincoln City. All right, we got a lot of red in Lincoln City. I've spent a lot of time in Lincoln City, but in the casinos, they also have outlet malls, just like Seaside. So that attracts a lot of people. We've got an F rating, D- in the property crime. So just like all these other towns, looks like it's a lot of property crime. I personally, again, I think Lincoln City is a nice place to visit. When you visit there, it doesn't look run down. It doesn't look like there's a lot of crime. I mean, this is probably just sensationalist, quite frankly. An F crime rate, let's see here. Chance of being a victim of violent crime is 1 in 246. Again, that's lower than California, and that's in the worst neighborhood. The best neighborhood is low as 1 in 800. So, again, the numbers don't really necessarily rank so much with that rating. So that's how you kind of see some of these websites that have lists with the worst neighborhoods, the most dangerous neighborhoods. When you dig into the numbers, it's really not that bad. All right, let's look at the 10-year. As reported by the Lincoln City Police Department, they're about average here the last few years, but they're down, coming from 2018, almost touching 60 per thousand people, 55 per thousand people. So a little bit higher than some of those smaller towns, than Warrenton, than Astoria, than Seaside, but kind of more a little bit in line with Coos Bay. But again, you compare that statewide, compare that to other states, it's still pretty low. All right, next is Florence. Got a little bit of orange in here, but we've got some green, some yellow as well. Florence is a pretty small town, and again, they get an F from crimegrade.org. And again, it's the property crime, not the violent crime, so probably not gonna get attacked by some random person. You might get somebody going through your stuff though in the middle of the night, depending on where you live. Chance of being a violent crime victim as high as 1 in 504, as low as 186. So very similar to a lot of the other Oregon coast towns. Property crimes maybe a little bit higher. Again, for the state, maybe on par, but compared to other states and nationally, pretty low. And your violent crime is definitely on the lower side. All right, and finally we have Tillamook. All right, so we've got some red, some orange, some green, kind of got everything in here. This is the downtown area. They get a D overall. Again, it's not the violent crime, it's the property crime. Chance of being a victim of crime in Tillamook, 1 in 13. On the high side, 1 in 49. On the low side, but for that violent crime though, again, much, much lower. So that's kind of what you should expect along the Oregon coast. Your crime rate might be a little bit higher in some places compared to statewide or nationally, but it's mostly property crime, not a ton of violent crime. Let's take a look finally at the 10-year. All right, pretty low, pretty low. So topping out in 2018, trending down. And you can kind of see right here where they're at, somewhere in the neighborhood of 14, 13 people per thousand people will experience a crime. So overall, that's pretty low. Overall, I would say that Tillamook is a pretty safe place. I've always felt safe there. I think it's a nice place to go. It's always looked nice, visually it doesn't look run down. You don't see a lot of crazy people or trash or anything like that. So I think some of these numbers are a little bit misleading. But either way, if you are looking for a very specific neighborhood, regardless of where you're looking along the Oregon coast, if you want to buy or sell a home, get in touch with us, give us a call, send us an email, shoot us a text. We'll be here for you for all of your home sale needs along the Oregon coast.